On last episode, we said we had a big announcement for the podcast. It's absolutely true. And today we have that announcement for you. So let's get to the episode.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD
Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 337 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Breuner, and joining me is Chris Robley. Chris, how are you today? We just got back from Nashville.
Tired, but great. Good times. Always good times.
Maybe a little hungover.
Yeah, my eyes may look like they're suffering from, I don't know, exhaustion, being stoned, but it's neither of those actually. My teary eye, my glassy eyes have to do with the news announcement, but we'll get to that. How are you?
To that. I'm doing good. It's always amazing time when we're with the artist community. And so, yes, we have a big announcement, and it's one that I didn't think I'd be making anytime soon. But the announcement is that I will be leaving CD Baby and the DIY Musician Podcast. This will be my last episode. I never thought those words would come out of my mouth, but an opportunity popped up, and it felt like time for a change after 17 years of being here, helping CD Baby grow into what it's become. I felt like it was time to move on.
I think the lesson for me is that I can't take vacations anymore because I went on
That's
vacation.
right.
And, it's nice to have time away. And I think it was the very last day of my vacation, like the Friday afternoon, I get a call. Hey, Chris, it's Kevin. I know it's you. Your name comes on my phone. I got some news for you. What? It could be anything, but that was the last thing I expected to hear.
Yes, but it is not the end of my podcasting journey. It is not the end of my music journey. We'll talk about what I'm doing at the very end of the show. And it's not even the end of our journey together, Chris, because you and I have been doing so much together outside of CD Baby, doing a lot of artist mentoring. And that's been thriving and been an amazing experience for both of us to work one-on-one or us with the artists with very specific needs and challenges and opportunities. And so that's something that will continue forth as well. But yes, this will be my last episode on the DIY Musician Podcast. And I don't even know where to start. It's weird because we did the 300th episode where we did like the whole retrospective and talked about it. So I feel like that wasn't that long ago. So
we covered like the legacy historical ground somewhat. But I also want to say I apologize to anyone who this is your first episode. I don't even know who you are. I don't care. Yeah, but for people who've been with us for 15 years, I think they probably are. Yeah, maybe feeling a little shock right now.
Yeah, we've been podcasting for 15 years, doing the DIY Musician Podcast. And it's been a labor of love. There's been times where we thought it might die just because we got so busy as CD Baby was growing and exploding and independent music was exploding. But we kept it alive. And Chris, at some point in the episode, will speak to what's to come next, because the podcast isn't going away. This is my end of the line for the DIY Musician Podcast. And one, I have to say a huge thank you to all of you that have been listening over the years. Many of you who I've connected with personally, many of you who have just been out there quietly supporting us and enjoying what we do. If it weren't for you, this podcast would have died years ago. It really has been something that the idea started as a way to engage as a community and learn from each other. And your enthusiasm for it has really kept the podcast going for many, many, many years. And is the main reason I loved being a part of it. And hearing your stories, learning from the cool things artists in the community are doing, trying them out myself, sharing them with all of you all. And, Chris and I would be like, this thing, let's try it out and figure out if this is cool or legit, or just a scam, all those things that you and I just get in the trenches and have fun with it and
Mhm.
try to um, learn and grow along with everyone who's listening to the podcast. So again, yeah, never thought I'd say those words. I thought
Wow.
you had to kick me out of the building before it was
I
all.
Kevin has left the building. I have a few things to say, but I think I might save them to the end. But they sort of touch upon some of what you were just saying, particularly about it being a labor of love in the early days more than your job. So I'll say more about that at the end. But
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So what we're gonna do on this episode, there's still some content. There's still some meat here to talk through. I put together my top 6 pieces of advice to artists. Like these are more like timeless pieces of advice, doing a lot of reflection and about like what do I want artists to know. And again, like I said, this isn't the end of my journey in the music business or my journey in the artist community. I'm actually very much more involved in a lot of things than I have been at certain times. So this is just a turning of the page to a new chapter. So we're going to talk about those 6 pieces of advice and dig into some of them. That'll be fun. But before that, I just thought, there's some things about my personal journey I've never really shared with the artist community as a whole. And that I thought was worth sharing. If somebody did like the deep dive 2-hour interview with me, this stuff would absolutely come up. But when most people want to, we're talking about where career things are now or the music industry is now, it's stuff that I just kind of, don't bring up, don't talk about. It's not necessarily something that I'd ever wanted like everyone knowing about me, but I just thought at this point it's like, hey, there's more things you should know about my artist journey and the adversity and the struggles and all that I've gone through. And so I actually wrote it all out because I knew that I would not be able to make it through otherwise, and I probably won't make it through it either way. And I can't look at Chris when I read this either because I'll just be crying like a baby.
well, so 2 related things. You pretty much did all the work for this episode. You wrote this story about your younger life. You put together your tips. I was like, I got to do something. So I made this knowing that by the end we'd both probably spend at least 20% of the episode crying. So this is my contribution.
Yeah, there it is, right there.
There
If you're not watching the video version, there's cry emojis on the screen.
So anytime we start weeping, I'll try and block our
yeah. You can block us
embarrassing
out.
faces.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, should I
Yeah, I'll read this.
okay.
So yeah, here we go. Again, this is just some more like where I came from, like the beginnings of my musical journey that I thought was worth sharing. Because most of you know me from the podcast, or maybe you know me from Small Town Poets or CD Baby in some capacity, and maybe make assumptions about how I got to where I am and what I've gone through. But I just thought I'd share all this. So here it goes. I'm going to read it because that's the only way I'd be able to do it. So here we go. It was a single moment where it felt like all my music career hopes and dreams came crashing down before they had even truly started. What made it worse is that it didn't happen in private, but on stage in front of all my peers. I was a sophomore at Belmont University and had just experienced utter humiliation as during my recital performance on classical guitar. Yes, I had to take classical guitar as a guitar major. It was like I received a giant shot of adrenaline. My hands started shaking uncontrollably where I could barely play. Then my mind went completely blank and I couldn't finish the one and only song I was required to play that day. I sat there with 100 other music students staring at me, all of which had insane amounts of natural talent and far more years of experience than me. Unable to finish, I played a G chord to end everything, then got up and walked out of the auditorium. I went back to my dorm room and sobbed. I was embarrassed just to show my face on campus again, because if you want to be a professional guitar player, you have to be able to play in front of people. It's at this point I need to tell you more of my backstory. I've had the pleasure to meet many of you over the years, and chances are you know the person I am now, but not a lot about where I started. I was an extremely late bloomer. Heading into high school, I was under 5 feet tall and well under 100 pounds. I was on the receiving end of nonstop bullying from 7th to 11th grade. I was the kid that no matter what, I was always picked last, and people would openly talk about how they expected me to fail. To say I had zero self confidence would be an understatement. My senior year, I changed schools in hopes to just blend in before I went off to college. Just like many of you, I took piano lessons growing up. I got pretty good, but I just didn't connect with it. When I was 16, I picked up a guitar and I knew my life was forever changed. I was just a middle class kid from San Diego. I didn't have any professional musicians in my family or understanding of the industry. I just knew what I saw on MTV and loved how music made me feel larger than life. Fast forward back to college after that devastating moment. I was fortunate enough that my guitar professor took me under his wing and told me about performance anxiety. He had dealt with it and could tell that I was dealing with it as well. There was help out there for me, and that my hopes of playing guitar professionally were not lost. It wasn't a quick fix, and it's taken me years to feel as comfortable on stage like I do now. So if that's something you struggle with, please hear me and that there is help for you. This is also something you should know about me. Regardless of all the bullying and rejection I faced growing up, when I put my mind to something, there is no stopping me. While in college, I would tell people how insane Nashville was and that I was easily in the lower fourth of talent in my class. I was going to school with people whose parents were literally making the records at the top of the charts. However, what blew my mind was watching all these crazy talented people give up the second they were pushed out of their comfort zone. I did the opposite. I wanted a music career so badly, I made a habit out of putting myself in uncomfortable situations. Situations where I was in over my head and clearly the least talented person in the room. Situations where anxiety might get the better of me. I had many more embarrassing moments, but I also experienced intense personal growth. I never finished college because I joined Small Town Poets after my fourth year of school. We were signed to a major label before the end of summer, so I had a good excuse not to go back to college. I lacked 3 classes, 2 of which I was completely terrified to take. If you know my professional career, you'll find it completely ironic that those 2 classes were speech class and my senior recital. I honestly stressed about them over a year before I was supposed to even take them. Now that you know more of my story, you'll understand why I look back in astonishment at the fact that I've played thousands of shows, the largest to 100,000 people. Small Town Poets sold hundreds of thousands of albums. We were nominated for a Grammy. I've had numerous songs used in TV and film. Public speaking has become one of my favorite parts of my job, and I have no problem standing up and speaking in front of 1,000 of my musical peers. I don't say any of that to brag. I say it because I've had the privilege to meet so many of you over the years and even work on music with some of you. I know that there is serious. I knew I wasn't going to make it through this whole thing. I know that there's serious adversity that most artists face in pursuing a music career. For some of you, I know that the very real specifics of that adversity. I just want you to know you're not alone. You can overcome those challenges and build the career you want on your terms. I walk around events like the DIY Musician Conference, and I have to be honest. I get a little jealous because I feel like most of you have so much more natural ability than I ever have. If I can overcome my personal challenges and scrape together some success in music, then there should be no stopping you. While my journey at CD Baby and with the DIY Musician podcast is coming to an end, my participation in the indie music community is as strong as ever. This isn't the last time you'll hear my voice on a podcast either, and you'll still see me out on the conference circuit like I've always been with some new and exciting things to talk about. It's just another moment for me to step out of my comfort zone and turn the page to a new chapter. A music career is a beautiful mystery because music is a beautiful mystery. We can analyze it and strategize around it. We can put forth our best effort. But at the end of the day, there's just mystery and magic that we can't control or explain. Music does things to us that nothing else can. That's what makes it so exciting. It's unpredictable, and that's why I'm hooked for life. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say, and I barely made it through that last part.
Okay, here's the tears emojis again.
Yeah.
Bringing out my sniffle as well for all of you lucky listeners at home. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just wanted to share more of my past just because I often look at other people and go, oh, they have it so easy. Yeah, I even said it in that whole thing that, I'd be in college and these artists that had talent and means and experience that I didn't have and feel like it must be so easy for them. But you never know what someone's dealing with behind the scenes and what they're putting on the line in order to be there. And so that's something I've never really talked about on the podcast before, but I figured, it's worth sharing. I don't even think I've told you before that I take stuff for performance anxiety. And it's not something I don't even know if the guys in Small Town Poets know, but everybody knows now. So anyway, and it's something I know a lot of artists deal with. The more I've talked to people about it and opened up about it, I found out that more artists dealt with that and that it's a part of their artist story and journey. And that, as artists, there's always these things that we have to push through and fight for and all that.
No, I related to a lot of that because my sort of what do you call just performance anxiety, like the stage fright, butterflies, whatever people want to call them, like mine are not consistent. It really and I don't know necessarily why they appear more strongly sometimes than others, and sometimes I'll be totally confident stepping on stage and other times I'm terrified. Not sure what the difference is, but so I can relate to that in some way. And then your recital nightmare, I shared something similar. Like I had a guitar recital I had to do and I played the piece. I think I got to the end and I think it was fine. But then the music teacher was like, is that it? Like, is in and I didn't really quite know if he meant like, that's the piece you chose to do, or like, are you going to do more now? Cause that wasn't very impressive. And that stuck with me for years. I was really ashamed of that critique of letting this guy down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was a hard day because before I had gone to school, I had never been in a band. I had occasionally done like a Phil Keggy solo at church. Church was very different back then. It did not, like, you go to church now and they got full rock bands with production. That was not the world I was in. So I really just didn't have much experience playing with people or even being around other musicians to even gauge levels of talent. Not like I experienced when I got to Nashville. And so that blew my mind to begin with. And then to realize that you're not only feeling like you're playing from behind, but that you have some other challenges that are emerging that you didn't really understand or know about to that point. Mm-hmm. That was very hard. It all came to a head that day. And yeah, it was pretty devastating.
Well, I don't know if this is one of the lessons that you're going to share later, and maybe if it is, hopefully I'm not ruining anything, but I remember you saying when you started speaking more often for work, and particularly at those early DIY musician conferences when you were kind of hosting and giving an introductory welcome message and then sometimes a keynote, you had this like, I got to fake it till I make it attitude. And like, and I don't think anyone in the audience would have known any different, but I remember you exerting effort to like push through it. And even this is probably sounds like a stupid example, but I remember when people started doing video conferencing more, like in 2007, 8, like fairly early days at CD Baby for us, you were like, oh, it's the most annoying thing in the world. And it's so awkward, but I forced myself to look at the camera instead of the screen because it was just one example. I'm like, oh, Kevin like makes very deliberate decisions about intention and how to direct your energy, even when you're acknowledging they're uncomfortable. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is one of my points. I mean, so we can dive into
all right.
My top 6 pieces of advice to artists. And these are sort of like, I was thinking about evergreen key pieces of advice that I've learned over the years. And one of them is what you were just talking about. If you want to grow, you've got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations all the time. And I would add that in what you said, intentionality with it, because it's not just throwing yourself in uncomfortable situations for the sake of torturing yourself.
And with
Although
no goal in mind.
Yeah, although there's times I'm like, what the hell am I doing to myself? But the idea of like, I'm always trying to think about how can I rise above, or how can I present myself better? How can I learn to do this better? So, for example, on the speaking front, part of how that evolved is, after we started doing this podcast, I started getting asked to be on panels and stuff. And that was a challenge just in of itself, to adjust and speaking in public like that. And I got used to it, but then I also got really angry at all the crappy advice I would be sharing. Some of the panelists would be sharing, or especially, at certain conferences like South by Southwest, a lot of people do it just for the free badge, and they show up hungover or drunk and just get on a soapbox, and it's like they don't add value to the attendees a lot of times. That doesn't happen with everybody, but at that time, it absolutely was a pattern I was noticing. And I would get so frustrated. I'm like, these people came to see us give them something of value. It's not about us getting on a soapbox, or at least show up prepared. And then I got an email from the NAMM show saying, hey, would you be interested in speaking? This was in 2013. I'm like, yes, I'm going to do it. I want to do this by myself. I'm going to force myself to do it by myself, because I'm tired of people giving bad advice. And I put together a presentation, and I spent months on it, literally months. I rehearsed it like crazy, and it went amazing. I was terrified. I was very anxious for weeks leading up to it, but it went well, and it sort of opened up a new door for me to start speaking by myself and publicly, and really start building my comfort in that area. All that to say, if you had known me in high school or college, that would be the last place you would find me. In fact, like I said, I had procrastinated taking speech class until the very end, which I never did in college because I was terrified of it. And standing up in front of people and talking was terrifying to me. So it's those things I've just been like, I want to get over this. I want to be intentional. How can I not just throw myself in this situation, but who are people that are doing those things well that I can learn from? So when I step into it with confidence, knowing that what I'm presenting, or my presentation, or what I'm talking about is good. And so then I'm not worrying about the content. I'm just managing myself to get up the nerve to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think you applied a mix of preparation for one, which meant that when you were finally on stage, or whatever the thing is you're doing outside your comfort zone, you had skills to draw on, or at least practice to draw on. But then there's also that thing of like kind of like exposure therapy. Like it's not enough to just prepare and then do it once. You got to do it enough. And so like whether it's public speaking, or playing in front of a crowd, or sharing new music, or submitting your music to be critiqued, it's like one time's not going to be enough. You got to just make a pattern of this thing you're uncomfortable with. So hopefully there are either massive or gradual improvements.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that first year after I spoke at the NAMM show, it was a nice room, lots of people. And again, the situation being like, these are all like LA people. They don't want to hear from some random guy from Portland. They've got their LA attitude. I'm making all these assumptions about the audience just to like, I don't know. But then after I did it, the feedback was amazing, but I was so jacked up. I'm like, when can I do this again? I'm like, you kidding? You just tortured yourself for 3 months straight.
I'll go in the next room right now and do the same speech.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, the other thing that I'd mentioned in my career where I was really uncomfortable, way in over my head, and made a fool of myself, was I auditioned to play in this band that was signed to a label. This was before I was with Small Town Poets, as well. I was still in college. I went to the rehearsal space. I would not say I was fully prepared. One of the songs had this weird time signature, the way it started, like this drum fill. I went and listened to it again like a couple years ago. I still couldn't figure out how to come in properly. But that was one of the songs, and I totally botched that. And then they wanted me to sing, and I'm not a singer. And I've like walked out of there going, wow. And they taped it and everything. I'm like, that was a disaster. But the one thing I did learn is what that process looks like, what level you need to be prepared at in order to do it. So I learned a lot of things. The funny thing, though, is that after Small Town Poets was signed, the band that I had done that audition for was called Jeff Moore in the Distance. We were the opening band for the Jeff Moore in the Distance tour for their new album that I was auditioning for.
Huh. Did
And
they
our
recognize
album,
you?
oh yes, and our album was outselling theirs like by a long shot. So it was kind of this like
and the reason
sweet
why
redemption of
the reason why your album outsold theirs is because it didn't have a crazy drum fill in 13/8 or whatever.
Yeah, it was. I might have to go back and listen to that again later today and try and figure out how the count where the one is, because I could never figure that out. It wasn't a hard song. It was just like trying to figure out how to come in with the band. So yeah, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. As artists, it feels like just naturally that happens a lot, but really trying to be intentional about why you're doing it and improving. The last thing I'll say is, like, even if you just saw the videos that I've been doing on my Instagram and TikTok feed, there's several people who are probably listening to this episode that I messaged and said, give me feedback, honest feedback about doing this. And, you're thinking, oh, they're just going to say they love it. And I got some real criticism. And at first I was like, oh, but then I thought about it. I'm like, that's what I wanted. I want to do this better. And they gave me some real good feedback, and I made adjustments, and my videos started performing a lot better. And I think, for me, it's just, I've always tried to measure, like, what are the best of the best doing and how do they do it? And where am I falling short? And, you can't always match up to where everybody's at, but I at least hope to be intentional with how I go about it. So the next one I was going to say is that no one will believe in what you're doing if you don't believe in it yourself. And you've heard me say this on the podcast, that sometimes I say it as, no one's going to believe in your music more than you. And that to some people strikes them as weird, but I want all these fans to just adore my music, and that may be great, and that could happen. But you have to believe in what you're doing, especially at the early onset of your career, because if it feels like you don't care, no one's going to pick up that torch of caring and run with it if you don't care. And that idea that when you see how people communicate as an artist and they talk about their music, if it feels like they don't have passion for it, you're not going to spark passion for it in other people.
Well, as you were saying that, like, just a simple sort of economics equation came to me, and you, the artist, are the person putting your precious time into this thing. You could be spending it on anything else, and you're putting it into your music. You're probably going into debt in the early days to spend money you don't have to buy better instruments or get into a studio or to pay a mixing engineer to make your home recording sound better or whatever. There's massive expenses, time or money in this, and you're the one putting that investment into yourself. So just on like a dollar basis, you believe in yourself a whole lot more than anyone else. Like, literally, you believe in yourself the most from a monetary standpoint. So, I think embrace that, act like it, and do the things you need to do to get other people receptive to at least being excited about it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned it on the podcast. I know I did in one of the videos I made on my Instagram feed. Was that about this artist named Royal Lynn. She's kind of this rock country artist. It's not music I typically gravitate towards. I think it was just like a suggested post that popped up in my feed. And initially I looked at it because I thought, oh, this might be an example of an artist going overboard with the promotional stuff on the screen. And what grabbed me and kind of, I hit follow and then realized, like, why it's really working for her is because she's all in on her music. She is the most excited person about what's happening. And she does it in a way that it's not about, she doesn't talk about herself. She's like, we did this, we're in it together. But she's so excited. It feels more like she's leading a community than promoting music. And she just has this excited energy. And I know it's hard for some people because they're like, well, my music isn't rock or it's more mellow. It's like, there's still ways you can translate that you care and that you're excited about what you're doing.
Well, and it doesn't matter the genre, or it really doesn't matter any excuse you can make. There's always going to be some excuse, rationale you can put up for why you shouldn't have to work harder or work more creatively to get people to care. And I think, like, man, we hear from so many musicians still, 23 years into this century. Well, people should just like it because it's brilliant. Like, well, imagine a painter who was like painting in their barn and they think it's great and they want someone to see it. Well, they're going to go and say, like, hey, you should come see my painting. Like, or I need to go put the painting somewhere people will see it. No one's just going to go like on their own and know that this painting is there and admire it. Like, the painter has to go and do some work to get people to care. Same is true of music.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the thing that with art, it's like I said, it's this beautiful mystery, and you can analyze it and strategize, but still, for some reason, some things work and some things don't. But oftentimes, because there's that mystery around it, people need that like social proof, and it starts with you, the artist. If you think it sucks, why would I waste my time on it?
Well, and it's okay to what do you call it when you put a plant in the audience when you're giving a speech to, like, is it a plant maybe, but it's okay to do that in a music promotion sense. Like, I have shared music videos on, let's say, Facebook or Instagram, and literally asked 15 of my closest friends to be like, hey, will you, as soon as I post this, will you like it and comment on it? Because it's going to seem exciting. And then, like, every time I've made the effort to get people early to do something, those posts always do better because it looks like a party that now other people have the permission to enjoy.
Yeah, the word permission is key. Was it Derek? His
first follower?
Yeah, the first follower thing that he did at a TED Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about first follower, and everyone's watching the crazy guy dancing at the festival, making fun of him or kind of going, oh, that's weird, or I wish, maybe they're thinking, I wish I could feel that free in this environment. But then when someone else jumps in, that's what starts the landslide, because everyone knows, oh, okay, it's okay to buy into this.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes that's, like you said, it's just getting people to do that.
And from the standpoint of momentum or exponentiality or whatever the word would be, like, the video, it's pretty long, of the guy dancing by himself.
Oh yeah,
remember, he might be there for 2 minutes dancing like a fool on his own. And basically the second there's a second person there, the entire festival joins, like, within a minute. Like,
yeah,
it's just a mad rush all of a sudden because they were just waiting for permission.
Yep. All right, my next piece of advice, because that was number 2. Number 3 is you've got to learn to say no. There's always a million reasons to put music to the side. So many people, especially when we've been doing this podcast in times where Small Town Poets has been doing a lot of recording, maybe doing some shows and having day job, all that music stuff going on, and a family. You're like, how do you make it happen? And it's like, I say no to a lot of things that behind the scenes you don't realize that I'm just not partaking in, because I'm choosing to spend my precious time on music when I can. And that I don't say that sound like I choose to do music. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of parties that or things or events that happen that I make the choice of, like, if I want to do music, I'm going to have to say no to these things, because it's a trade-off. And it's hard. And I see that a lot of other artists struggle with that, where they feel guilty because there's all these other tasks that need to be done, and music feels frivolous to some people, and not necessarily the artist, but the other people that are looking in on seeing how we're choosing to spend our time. Or there's, social pressure. Hey, we're all going to do this. Why? You don't need to practice again. You already know how. Like, they're not invested in your music career. They just want a buddy for the evening, and you're trying to, hit momentum and reach particular goals with your music. And And it's hard because music is looked at by people as just something you do when you have free time, and not being, when you're intentional with it, a lot of things will try and come and steal you and rob you of that time.
Yeah, and it can be cultural things, TV shows, competing interests. Maybe you're really into sports and you're really into music, and in some seasons you're really only going to have to make time for one. Might be family responsibilities, which you should not shirk. But I would say for the listeners who maybe don't have all the time in the world, I think what can help you stay productive and say no to things is to just keep sacred whatever small amount of time you can dedicate. So I'm not saying, oh, you got to make every single night you dedicated to music. Like that would make you a selfish jerk if you had family and a job, whatever. So just say, you know what, Sunday nights for 3 hours, that's my time to make music. And then if you do that, you arrange with the rest of your life to make that an option. You can't say no to that. Don't say no to that very small, precious amount of time you've devoted to yourself. And that can be very difficult too.
Go ahead.
Just one other thing I was going to say is musicians sometimes have to get good at saying no to other musicians as well. Like you can't collaborate with everyone who wants to. I feel like I have said yes to a lot of people that I actually do want to collaborate with, but it hasn't played out because I just don't have a lot of time. And then I feel this pressure, this sort of nagging, like I'm letting them down or I'm offending them, that I haven't shown more enthusiasm or made it a reality. And that's on me. But anyway, sometimes you have to just say, you know what, that's not realistic for me now. I have to prioritize my own music.
Yeah, because it could be saying no to the distractions that keep you away from music. It could be no from the musical distractions that are making you too busy to actually focus on the thing that you're trying to move forward. And I think it's sort of like a sub item, a bullet under this. It feels related. Maybe it's not, but also as your career continues to grow, you're going to realize that you're forced to say no, but oftentimes when everyone's having fun, you're working because you're the entertainment. You're the thing that people are going to do. That was, I think, one of the things that I really saw happen when I joined Small Town Poets and started touring heavily. It was like, oh, we're going, my friend in college is having a birthday party. Sorry, got a gig. Or, hey, we're going on this weekend trip for spring break. Sorry, I got a gig. We've got this big New Year's Eve blowout we're going to. I'm like, I'm absolutely playing New Year's Eve. There's no way.
And then to add another, detail to that, it could be that you're at the gig and someone wants to like invite you back to their place for a party afterwards. And maybe that sounds really fun, but you have a 10-hour drive tomorrow. And you have to say no to that and yes to your health and your ability to do a good show the next day and not be miserable without offending this person who is clearly a fan enough to want you to come back to them. So anyways, even when you're doing the music, you might have to say no to lots of other things around it.
Yeah. It got to the point like, hey, I'm usually free on Monday nights. You want to party on a Monday night? Because
it's a perfect night for everyone else to be like, no, it's Monday.
Exactly. Like, well, those are the Monday and Tuesday are the most likely days you'll catch me. Otherwise, I'm probably not here. Competition for time becomes a challenge. The next one that I've got here, number 4, is there's a difference between saying you want a music career and actually doing what it takes to make it a reality.
Man, we see this one a lot.
Yeah. And it goes along with some of the things we've already said and some of the things that the remaining items, but I oftentimes will be talking to an artist like, I want nothing more than a music career. In fact, I've been in that place in my own life many times where I want nothing more than music career. I'm like, why on earth are you doing all these other things then? And I should say music career in quotes, because that could be a different thing depending on who you are. But whatever goals you have or what sort of level you're hoping to achieve or where you'd like to get to, saying that, and that's what you want, but then sort of self-sabotaging because you've got all these things that can be easily moved out of the way, whether it's just wasting time or doing a lot of busy stuff, but not being intentional with what you're doing, not understanding what you're trying to accomplish. I'll talk to artists. They'll be like, I'm trying to market. I'm on social all the time. Like, you're goofing off on socials. What you're doing? You're not really promoting your music. So just call it what it is. I'd rather you not do any of that and get better at your craft, because that's what needs to come first.
There's at least two instances of this problem. One is like, you might not yet know that you can't meet the requirements of what you're asking or expecting. It's easy to dream. Oh, I'm laying in bed daydreaming about being on stage. That sounds amazing. That's what I want. And then when I personally went to Alex Steininger, who we both worked with for a long time, and he was interested in like managing and being a booking agent for me, we went out to drinks and he was like, well, let's do it. I need you on the road 175 days a year. And I was like, oh, what? Yeah, that's what I need from clients if I'm going to take them on, like, because otherwise it's not worth my time. And up until that point, I thought that's the dream I wanted. And then I was like, yeah, just immediately met with the reality of like, I can't do that right now. So, I mean, I guess I'll pat myself on the back for at least recognizing that and walking away from that particular dream, as opposed to holding on to it and then expecting everyone else to still do the work. Like, that's the thing that drives me nuts, is when you're like, oh, you have a big dream. Here's the 478 things you need to do in the next 6 months to make that a reality. And they're like, well, can you do it? Like, what? This is my career. It's your.
This may sound harsh, but there's a lot of people that I've met, maybe some listening to this podcast, where all they want is the dream, because the reality of, like what you're saying, is terrifying. And there's several things that happens when it becomes a reality. It is no longer a dream. And that may sound exciting and fun and good, but it also, you realize this just transitioned into work, a job, a thing that I do every day, where the dream is sort of an escape. It's like this romanticized version of what it'll be like in your head, and it's an escape. And maybe someday it'll be that way. In reality, a music career is a job. It doesn't matter if you're on stage every night. I could tell you, it was a crazy realization to be going out on the tour for our second album, Listen Closely. And like the first several weeks of shows were all sold out in like 1,500, 2,000 seat auditoriums. It was amazing. You would think I would just be on cloud nine. I was like barely getting any sleep, going 100 miles an hour, had zero downtime, and also had to squeeze in playing a show during the day and manage a lot of people around me. And, especially now that you know more about my backstory, that is intense. And that was a very different reality than the romanticized version I had playing a hairbrush guitar in junior high watching Bon Jovi on MTV. It's like what that reality in my brain, what my brain had dreamed up that my life must be like, compared to the realities of living it out. It's very different. And I know a lot of people making that transition is terrifying, because they lose that romantic version of that idea in their head.
Well, I think people also need permission to realize that dreaming smaller is not failure. Like, I love playing live so much, but when I do it too much, the magic goes away. And because I don't rely on that for like my living expenses, I've got a day job. Like, I don't want to do it too much, and I don't want to get to that point where it becomes a chore or something I dread. And I'm like, you know what? I think that's okay. I think it's okay to know where your point is, where the magic is still there. Not to say this goes past to your former point about pushing past your comfort zone. Sometimes things are a grind and work for some larger goal, but it's okay to let some of the dream go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me would be the advice on that sub bullet of that, is that you can still have you can still be a dreamer and thrive. And it might just mean that you need to adjust the dream some, or understand where you're gonna feel fit in best, and what it looks like for you. Because I think one of the other realizations, I mentioned it in that thing I read, but it wasn't just in college. Just while I was in Nashville, it was just mind blowing how many, like every day, it's like giant busloads of musicians show up to Nashville, like
The
with
rest of the
stars in
world
their
is just shipping them there.
stars in their eyes, and so many of them were just unbelievably talented, and how many of them would just turn around and go home because of the realities of it being work, it being a job. It didn't feel like the movies, it didn't feel like what I thought it would. And yeah, so I mean, I think it's also figuring out where you thrive in that space, and what really keeps you going with it, because music is not like, if it's not a job where you can just show up and go through the motions. It just doesn't work that way. In most regards, you got to have passion for it. Otherwise, if you just want to go through the motions, you can just go work at a bank or something.
Mhm.
Two more items. This one I know is something that a lot of artists struggle with. It's not about being good. It's about doing something that people care about. This hit me in the face big time while I was in college. My background as a guitar player in the era I grew up in, it was like the era of the guitar heroes. The top 40 charts were almost all rock bands with major guitar players. Uh, you can't find a single one of them on the top 40 charts today. But right as I was going into college, my senior year in high school, Nirvana came out, and it was like all that world just came crashing down, and suddenly everything was different. I find myself in school where I'm learning all this intense technical stuff about playing and guitar playing and all that kind of stuff, and my world's opening up there. And what everyone cares about is Kurt Cobain going down down. It's
Two
like
notes.
two
Let them
notes.
ring.
Let them ring. He probably didn't even know what notes he was playing. And like I'm sitting there in school frustrated because I'm like, all this technical stuff and insane playing, and what people care about is that.
And just to be a music geek for a sec, the other thing that's amazing about that song is the verse, the pre-chorus, and the chorus are all exactly the same chord change. 4 chords, same ones, over and over and over again,
Yeah.
the whole song. So
Yep.
you did not need to be a Joe Satriani or whoever the guitar player of Rat is to pull off some of the most important music that was made that century.
And honestly, if you go watch all the behind the musics from that era, all those artists, especially the ones that were not able to survive the grunge invasion, will cite that frustration that these guys aren't as good as us. They're not as technical as us. And the point being that that doesn't matter. Nobody cares about how good you are, specifically at your instrument. What they care about is that you do something that resonates, that they care about, that they connect with, and that's more important. And I've talked to a lot of artists that have been frustrated because they are incredibly skilled at their instrument, but they don't seem to make a connection with people. And that's where you just have to do some self assessment and be like, well, at the end of the day, they're not there to see, like, by and large, me do scales up and down the neck of this instrument. They want to hear something that moves their soul,
Yeah.
or that connects to them in some way. It could be just, it's fun, but that's a tough thing for people to realize at times.
And I think one thing, to go back to your previous point that we were discussing, is like, we're talking about putting in the work. No one else is going to help you achieve your dream. Practice, 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 or whatever. But the fact that art and connection is a little bit mysterious and ineffable means sometimes it can be hard to know where to put the work in. Like, because the guy running scales all day and knowing, mixolydian, whatever, all the modes, and can solo and over any chord change, was pretty much out of jobs and obsolete, despite having, the proficiencies that are probably literally 1,000 times more skilled and technical than Kurt Cobain ever was as a guitar player.
Yeah, and a lot of the music that came out of that era was a reaction to like this over technical style of music that was pervasive in rock and roll, and it came down to more about the feeling, the vibe, the expression of the lyrics, where by and large, rock and roll in the 80s, not a lot of in-depth lyrics. It sort of had a formula going similar to country music where you need a pickup truck, you need a six-pack, but it was like you need a party, you need a good time, and so there was a lot of things that changed with that.
A lot of food reference innuendos.
Yeah, anyway, all right. So my last one here is the one that I hope people always remember the most. The fact that someone is moved by what you created is the biggest reward you'll ever receive. Chase that over the money, because if you're chasing money, chances are, I mean, yes, every artist wants to get paid. So obviously, I want you to get paid. But when you're creating art, usually your best work comes from the moments where you're not just thinking about getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of careers in the music industry where that's what you do. You have to write a jingle, you have to do this or that. You maybe a session player and you just paid to come do this thing. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about artists, and a lot of artists that listen to this podcast that are writing and recording original music that they feel passionate about. And typically they feel that passion for it, and their brain just goes, or the industry has taught us to go, well, money is the measure of your value and worth. And that is not true.
I don't want to, I know I've been a big defender of top 40 pop music in the past. That, it can be brilliant. But I would say, like, when you're talking about where the industry puts its emphasis, people don't generally turn on pop radio, I don't think, and cry. They don't turn on top 40 radio and say, oh my God, I've been in that same situation. Maybe once in a while there's a song that sneaks in that has that kind of emotional resonance. But that seems to be like, that's where the money's made, because people want to dance.
Yeah. And at the DIY Musician Conference last summer in my keynote, I mentioned a story where, we did some shows last summer, and we did this house show, and the host was a big fan, and he requested that we play a particular song. And I'm like, that's weird. We don't ever play that song. It's a good song, but we don't ever play it. And he kept asking about it. And so because we were at his house, Michael worked it up and played it. It's also part of the reason we didn't play it is because it was tuned down to D, I believe. Or no, it had dadgad tuning. Like, we'd never just take a moment in a show to tune our guitars to that in order to play that song, and usually didn't have extra guitars on the road with us. But anyway, he starts to get prepared to play the song, and the host says, but I need you to know why I want you to play this song. He said at this time in his life, I think he was going to like his master's or something that was related to school, and it was just, he said he was for like a month, he was at the lowest point of his life that he had felt like he'd ever been. And he said, but your song got me through it. And so, I was sitting there and just like, it just hit me like just this wave of emotion came over me, that as the artist is very special to feel that you did that for somebody else. And a lot of times when you're making music, it can feel very thankless. You're in a studio, you've maybe played it 1,000 times. It's hard to still feel that same way you feel about it, and or feel it the way that it hits fans. But when he said that, it was just like, that was the best compliment ever. That's the best thing anyone could say about our music. Yes, we want to get paid. Yes, we would like to keep being able to afford to do records, but that is what actually keeps us going.
And the worth of that was not felt for you in real time. It didn't show up in Spotify streams. You didn't get that song. Maybe you did, that song placed on a TV show or something, but
No.
like, these are the things we forget when we think, oh, that song of mine still has less than 1,000 streams, or this one hasn't made any money for me, or whatever. Like 20 years later, you'll hear something change someone's life that you didn't think was a success in the time, in the moment, but succeeded beyond anything you could have dreamed of. Like your song literally changed someone's life, or maybe even saved someone's life.
Yeah. And if you look down our for that particular song, that wasn't even the top. We've got 100 tracks on Spotify. I don't even think that was in the top 50. I think it was in the bottom third of songs that are streamed. So yeah, it was not one of our hits. So yeah.
I gotta bring up the tears emoji. Here we go.
All right. So yeah, that was one of those things that if as artists, that's something that you gotta pay attention to when those things are happening. Take note of it. Don't just brush it aside. Know that you're making an impact in someone's life, whether it's just that maybe you are the party, maybe you are the diversion and the fun where people just get to experience joy for a bit. But that's to me always been the biggest reward. Well, that was my top 6 pieces of advice to artists.
There it was. Everyone, you've got the wisdom.
What now, Chris? Well, a couple things. I will say, I mentioned at the top, I'll let you know what I'm doing next. I'll get to that in a minute, but I would love to stay in contact with as many of you as possible. We've been saying this on the podcast for a while. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram or TikTok. Some of you have been shocked that you've messaged me and gotten a response in like 30 seconds. They're like, man, I thought he had a life or something.
Well, now I have to say, if you've written me and haven't heard back, I'm sorry. I'm terrible at getting back to DMs.
I may have heard that, Chris.
They write me first, actually, and they don't hear. So then they write to you. And
I'm just the sloppy seconds. That's all I am. So yeah, I'm at K Breuner. If you're watching on video, it's been on the screen the entire episode. It's KBREUNER. I'm at K Breuner on Instagram and TikTok. I would love to connect with you there. I will definitely be posting about my coming journey there as well. And, like I said, my artist and career journey in the independent music community is not ending. It's just changing. Before we talk about that, I've said before on the podcast, but from day one at CD Baby, I've been there over 17 years now. Day one, I sat next to Chris. And Chris, it's been, oh man, we're going to need that crying emoji.
Here it comes.
There we go. It's been quite a journey, Chris. And the good news is you and our journey isn't ending even with the podcast or me leaving CD Baby, because we're doing some things together outside of that already. But you've been an incredible partner in the podcast. You've been an amazing friend and an encouragement to me musically. You're so dang talented. But anyway, it's been a joy.
Thank you.
To do this with you.
I want to reciprocate a sentiment first, but are you going to tell people exactly what you're doing? Or
I was going to wait till we're done crying and we can end with that.
Okay. Well, so let me say, I'm happy that you and I have our sort of side hustle in artist coaching and music marketing mentorship stuff. So we have a scheduled reason to still communicate every week online. Hopefully we'll still make some music together when we can, and hopefully I see you at events. But what I wanted to say, I don't know if it sounds melodramatic, but it's so sincere. Just thank you. Thank you. Because I think stewarding this community with you and educating people, encouraging artists through the podcast, the blog, the events we've done has been one of the most profound experiences of my life. It's definitely the most profound professional experience, for sure. Apologies to everyone listening and watching as we blabber and blubber about.
If they known us, they knew this was coming.
Yeah, right. And I think that this next thing I might say is probably so easy and obvious, but none of this would have happened without you. And I mean that not just because how do I say this? I think I wanted to draw the distinction between this being your work and this being a result of your initiative. Like when you started the podcast and were you integral in the blog and all this stuff, it was like, it wasn't your job. You weren't getting paid for it. We made a lot of it happen off hours, and you did the bulk of that work, particularly on the podcast. And it was something that was entirely your idea. You went to Derek, who owned the company, and he didn't discourage it, but he kind of could care less, basically. And you went and you made it happen.
I don't think he thought I would actually do it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, so I just think that it's worth paying tribute to that a massive amount of effort and initiative, because I think a lot of people wouldn't have tried it in the first place. If they started, they would have stopped after 2 episodes. And here we are 15 years later. And I think we've done some really cool stuff. And the other shout out I want to give you is that as these ideas came to you to explore and you were inspired to start making content to encourage artists, it came at this really interesting time of confluence between like the internet was still cool and exciting, and it was overlapping with the music industry in this way where it really felt like independence finally had a chance to shine and be valid and reach people. And I think you saw that way earlier than most of the industry. And I think what you did with the DIY brand on behalf of CD Baby was really like trailblazing and set the template for what the rest of the music industry has been trying to do since, which is sort of catch up to, I think, what you saw as effective content marketing in quotes, but really that's just an annoying term for like saying cool, relevant stuff to help people. Like, and just thank you for doing that, because it's been an honor.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been an honor to do it with you as well. I mean, I felt like we've you and I and a cast of characters who aren't on screen and who've been through the CD Baby doors over the years have done a lot of really great stuff and left our mark on the independent artist community. I was thinking about, we don't need to do a whole CD Baby retrospective, because I think again, that podcast episode 300, we did some of that.
Yeah.
But I was really thinking about, a lot of people think, oh, I've been here 17 years. I started in 2006. Like, oh, you were there from the beginning. I'm like, no, CD Baby actually started in 1998. But I think why people kind of think of that era being the beginning is because that's where the digital space was starting to take off. And there was a clear delineation between what had been the traditional past and the coming future, with the launch of the iTunes store and digital music starting to be adopted and moving away from CDs. Because all of the original, the years before that, CD Baby was so CD focused, and that sort of, it was new way for artists to connect, but it was still in line with how the past industry had worked. It just gave independent artists more access to sell to fans directly. But with the digital era, when we were back in those early crazy times of CD Baby, it really felt like, no, this is a fork in the road. This is something different, and things are never going to be the same again. And it's been quite a ride to be on that with CD Baby and with you and all the other folks that have meant so much to our journey along the way.
Heck yeah. Well, what's next for you?
Yes, I am not going away from music. You can't can't get rid of me that easy. um, yes, I'm going to be joining the Band Lab team and building out a lot of artist development and education resources, and podcasting will be a part of that. And so it's still a little bit undefined because it's stuff that hasn't existed there. If you're not familiar with BandLab, it's an app, and it also works in your browser, but it's an amazing platform that originally started around being able to do more collaborative recording in your browser. So things would be like in the cloud, and if I logged in somewhere else, you could see my tracks that I just put in. And then it has a whole social component, marketplace, and a whole bunch of other features. It's really exploded into a pretty amazing thing. So I'm going to be there, and I'm excited to see what happens. Something new and different. It's a different focus. It's, CD Baby is very much about the release cycle. Like we typically intersect with artists when they're thinking about releasing music and when they're promoting that new release, and where this is a different world altogether. So I'm excited. It's going to be a stretch and another season of growth for me. So that's where I'll be. So I'll still be everywhere. You'll still see my face.
Maybe we can have you as a guest on the podcast at some point.
I can finally get that DIY musician podcast interview that I've been dreaming about all these years.
Heck yeah. Well, speaking of that, tune in next week. I've been thinking over the past couple weeks, or since Kevin called me, about what the future of the podcast can be, and I've got ideas. I'll keep it a little vague for now and tune in next time for an unveiling of what the future holds. But I think it's going to be good. We'll obviously keep it centered on relevant discussions to working musicians and all that. That's it. Maybe we'll have Kevin back on as a guest.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd love to. Finally be a guest on the podcast
that you created.
Yeah. And, again, I would love to connect with as many of you as possible. Again, at K Breuner, and connect with Chris as well, at Chris Robley. He and I, like you mentioned, are still doing some things outside of this, like artist mentoring and strategy and all that. And I can't emphasize enough that the feedback and the excitement and the involvement by the artist community is really what this has always been about, and trying to bring people together so we can learn from each other. And I've learned just as much as anyone else who's listened to this podcast, because the whole thing's just been a learning journey. And I just want to keep that going. I want to keep being in contact and hearing your stories, hearing your successes, hearing your frustrations, and diving into it with you.
Well, episode 337.
It would have made more sense if we had left on an even number, don't you think? Or like a round number, like 340,
350.
350, yeah.
We could just name this episode 350 and make everyone wonder what happened to the
lost archives.
We'll just say your hard drive crashed or something.
That's right. All right. Well, I guess it's the last time I'm going to say that's going to do it for this edition of the podcast.
Gonna do it. You'll see me next week, and you'll see Kevin on Instagram.
There we go. See ya.
Love you, Kevin.
Love you, Chris.
See ya.